Okay, so today we're going to build a Rover. I saw this cool little RC car at the local discount store the other day, and I thought to myself, well, gosh, golly gee, wouldn't that provide us with most of the parts that we need for a fairly decent Rover? So out of the box, this is a fairly simple little unit here. It can go forwards and it can go backwards and it can turn left and it can turn right. And it does all of that in a very binary manner. There's no fine-grained control over the turning radius or anything like that. It's all, full velocity or off. The remote control on this thing is also very, very basic. Basically you can turn it on, you can turn it off. It's got forwards, backwards, left, and right, and that's about it. So we won't be using that. All in all, though, I'm really pleased with this thing. It's got four-wheel drive, and the suspension system on this thing is really, really nice. Not bad for a cheap toy, anyway. So let's open this thing up and see what we've got to work with here. There's four little clips holding the plastic top on. We can pop those off relatively easy and see what's underneath. The goal here is to keep as much of the original unit as we can and add on to it the parts that we need. We obviously don't need this plastic top thing here, but hopefully we can keep most of the rest of it. These wheels are great. The shocks are awesome. We've got decent motors on the front and the back. Looks like we've got basically 3 DC motors on this thing. All pretty good. So I imagine since we can't really do much with the remote control, we'll also have a circuit board on this thing that isn't terribly useful. And so we'll have to figure out how to drive those 3 motors. And basically we'll throw a whole bunch of electronics on it and slap Linux on it and see where we go from there. 3 of these cables lead back to 3 individual motors here. We've got battery in is a cable, and we've got another cable going out to the on-off switch. So let's unplug the cables and pop that circuit board out and see if we can't replace it with something a little bit more suitable for our mighty, mighty Rover. Just 2 screws hold the board in place, and with those out and the board out of the way, we'll be able to see the clear platform for our Rover. There's not a lot of room here to add much in the way of electronics, so we'll have to see how we can augment that space a little bit. Say goodbye to that little fella. The final component of our original device that we are most likely not going to use is, of course, the battery. A single screw and a little tab hold the door to the battery compartment in place. The battery itself is rechargeable. It's rated at 6 volts and 500 milliamp hours. That's just not going to be enough. I guess we're going to have to get creative and dig through our big box of batteries. So the closest thing I've got on hand is this pair of 3.7 volt lithium-ion batteries. That should give us plenty of juice to power a Raspberry Pi and a pair of motor controllers. We'll wire the batteries in series for a combined voltage of 7.4 volts. And we'll use this UBEC step-down converter to get into the 5 volt range for our Raspberry Pi. So now we're going to do a whole bunch of soldering, 3D printing, and swearing until we've got the final set of parts that are going to go into version 1 of our Rover. Everything should pretty much just snap together at this point. The circuit tray will sit snugly into the little harness that we built, and the cap will snap fit into the harness as well, securely holding the circuitry in place. The purpose of the harness is to elevate the circuitry above the chassis with enough room for all these darn cables that need to be connected. Once the cap is in place, our entire mod for this build is now fully self-contained in this simple green housing. The cables are a bit of a rat's nest, but if they were any shorter, it would be very, very difficult to connect them up. The first cable we'll connect is for the power switch. It's got 3 wires, so it's easy to identify. Next, we'll connect the steering wheel cable. We put a little piece of tape around it, so it's easy to identify as well. Note that these connectors will only snap together once they've been rotated and attempted in every possible combination and permutation at least twice. The final 2 cables are for the front and back wheels, respectively. For the purposes of version 1, they're interchangeable. Next, we have the single most difficult step in the entire build, unless, of course, you're as bad at soldering as I am. It's time for us to gingerly attempt to connect the harness to the chassis without pinching any of these cables and wires. At the same time, we need to feed these battery cables through to the battery compartment now that they're close enough to reach. It's a tight fit, but we're able to get all of the loose wires inside the housing. Finally, we flip it over and join the 2 halves together. We'll use the screws from the original platform to attach the harness to the chassis. As we close up the patient after a successful transplant surgery, I can't help but think about the road ahead. I guess the possibilities are really only limited by the amount of software I'm willing to write. I'm not really interested in recreating some type of remote control, like being able to maneuver this thing with my phone or something. I'd really like this thing to be autonomous and interact with its environment with minimal input from humans. We're not going to get very far without any sensors on this thing because it doesn't know where it is and it doesn't know where it's going and it won't notice when it hits something. So I guess we've got a lot of additional work to do before we've got a rover that could be called anything even approaching semi-autonomous. But let's not dwell on what we haven't got. We'll get there. Let's reflect for a moment on what we've accomplished. Now we've got a reference unit that we can refer to and add things, remove things, try things out. We've got 4-wheel drive. We've got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. We've got 4-wheel independent suspension, fine-grained steering, and velocity control. We've got batteries that should last a few hours. But best of all, we've got a quick little Linux box with big, chunky tires.